Good evening and welcome. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. If your significant other is mad, feel free to blame me.
I did.
So, welcome to the Gilroy Unified School District Board of Education. ¿Hay alguien que necesita intérprete para la junta? Thank you. First up on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, brought to you today by the Solorzano Middle School. Ms. Walker.
Good evening. On behalf of Solorzano Middle School, I have two of our ASB students who will introduce themselves and then lead us in the pledge. Ladies?
Hi, I'm Monica Lagotla.
Hi, I'm SB Galvan. Trujillo.
Please stand.
Sure. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You can be seated now.
Thank you very much. Next, item 3B, approval of agenda. I will entertain a motion.
So move.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. Next is the general public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any item or any issues within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board that is not listed on the agenda. No action can be taken on an item not on the agenda at this time, but may be referred to the administration or put on a future agenda. Individual remarks will be limited to 3 minutes each, and there's a pink card in the back for you to fill out if you want to do that. We have no cards at this time, so thank you very much. Next, report of action taken in closed session. We have one case of removal, suspension, expulsion of a student, case number 2019-12. I will entertain a motion.
Move to expel.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We have one no. Okay. Are there any further motions on this? Seeing none. We have a readmission of a student, case number 2018-12. The board voted 6-1 to readmit a student. Trustee Doyle voted no, and the other 6 trustees voted in favor. Next, C. Resolution 1819-26 and Resolution 1819-27. We'll just do 26. All 7 board members voted unanimously to approve a resolution to non-reelect one probationary certificated employee for the 2019-2020 school year. And Resolution 1819-27. All 7 members of the board voted unanimously to release 10 temporary certificated employees for the 2019-2020 school year. And that concludes that agenda item. Next, we have report to the board. The student board representative, Renee Alonso from Mount Madonna High School. Welcome, and go on up to the podium there and tell us your story.
Hello, everybody. My name is Renee Alonso, and today I'm going to be presenting Mount Madonna Continuation High School and Glenview Elementary. As shown in the picture, I don't know how to describe it, but the Glenview Elementary participated in the Bonanza Parade and came in second, but received a $2,500 check and not has exactly spent it on themselves. As you can see on there's a thermometer that counts as a tracker. The students have a goal of reading 2 million words, and the teachers pretty much. I am so sorry, I cannot speak English today. They count it every Monday and Friday, and they try to reach 2 million words. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to go forward. The one thing that the principal does spend the $2,500 check on is a really cool thing that I've never heard of any elementary school do. So one kid, or any kid, gets to walk to school and gets 1 ticket from a police officer. If a kid rides their bike to school with the helmet, they get 2 tickets. Now, every month they have a raffle, and if one kid gets chosen, they use the money to buy a new bike for the kid, which I find remarkable. So, as you can see up ahead, there's more activities, going through. And from February 14th, wearing red for caring character pillar as today, to March 16th, Run for Fitness, which I'm looking forward to. So today I'm going to be also talking about Madonna Continuat High School, which is my school. First off, I wanted to talk about moving to Gilroy High temporarily due to our flea problem. It was pretty simple for me to get to school because I live right down the street of Gilroy High, but it was more easy for me to see how it affected everyone else. And students did have a problem getting to school because they lived by Mantalli, which is across the school or across the city. The teachers did have problems with textbooks and have the lack of materials they need to teach, but we persevered. We fought through the hard times, and it was kind of hard to go to a different school that we weren't allowed to go back to, and having to be in the new building. It was quite nice, actually, I have to say. But we fought through it, and we made it through. So student leadership and ASB pretty much plan everything that we do at our school. ASB plans weekly raffles and sponsors spirit weeks. The student leadership class plans other fun activities. Mr. Ward, our history teacher, is pretty much the backbone of student leadership and ASB. They hosted the Thanksgiving feast, which was really good food. That's all I could say for that. They also choose the type of spirit. I don't know how to put it in words. I'm so sorry. They pretty much choose what we have to wear and what we should do for that spirit week. And they also hosted the pancake breakfast, which was kind of a good job to the students for working so hard. The one thing we're pretty much looking forward to is the student recognition events for the quarter award ceremonies, which we have to pretty much boost our morale and to have pretty much something to look forward to for having good, good grades, good attendance, and good attitudes. That's pretty much what the 3 A's are: academics, attendance, and attitude. Which something that's coming soon is our first field day from being, at Gilroy High. Another thing we're looking forward to is the field trips to Monterey Bay Aquarium, which is coming close. And later on in the year, we're going to be going to Academy of Sciences in San Francisco. Something that's coming up is the LPAC testing for EL students, which I'm no longer a part of, thank goodness. Most kids kind of struggle with that, but they fight through it too. Senior fun. On May 15th, senior recognition night, seniors are rewarded scholarships. And June 4th is the graduation ceremony. And we have 16 graduates so far, which is quite well considering that we are a small school. That is it. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I believe you might be the first student from Mount Madonna to make this presentation, and you did a great job, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Following that up, we have the superintendent's report.
Right, and I'm going to apologize right up front for the length of this report, but you'll recall that we haven't met in a month. So this is like 2 reports. That's my excuse. Anyway, a lot of really good things have happened this month, and the first thing I want to share with you and the public is all the administrators in the district are part of an organization called ACSA, the Association of California School Administrators, and our state's broken up into regions. We're in Region 8. And annually, districts can nominate administrators for awards. We haven't done it in a couple years, but this year we decided to nominate 2 people, and they've been selected and will be recognized at an event on May 10th. And so I'm really pleased to announce that Alvaro Mesa, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, has been selected as the Business Services Administrator of the Year. And Sonia Flores has been selected as the Secondary Principal of the Year. And we're really excited to have 2 Gilroy administrators be recognized in our whole region. So it's quite an accomplishment for our district, but particularly for these 2 outstanding administrators. And of course, after they're recognized on May 10th at the event, we always recognize them here at the board meeting. So they'll be recognized at the meeting in late May. So congratulations, Alvaro and Sonia. We're really proud of you.
Just amazing. Stand up so everyone could know who our award winner is.
Okay.
Dr. Flores, excuse me. Wasn't there another administrator nominated and selected for an actual award?
Not for this regional award, but there was another selection.
What was that again?
Who was that?
For a Women's Leadership Award. Am I blushing? Anyway, it's not an annual thing, but women administrators in our region are recognized periodically throughout the year. So I just got notified that I'm this month's Women's Leadership Award recipient. Thanks. I appreciate that, Mark.
I'm here for you, Debbie.
I know. We've been meeting, Alvaro and I have been meeting, we have 3 new board members. And my practice for many years has been when you have a new board member to do orientations. And so we've had a couple already, really good orientations. I'm really impressed with our 3 board members. They've asked great questions. They're picking things up fast. And we're right now going through our 3rd meeting individually about the budget. So we met with Enrique, and we have meetings coming up with Twin and Anisha. But we really appreciate the time. It's a big time commitment, but I hope worth it. The Gilroy Garlic Festival Association holds an annual dinner, which we've never attended before. So we were invited to attend this year. So James Pace, president, and I attended the Garlic Festival Association dinner. I think we have a picture of the Christopher Hyde Jazz Band. They were playing when we arrived. But we're really glad that we went. We learned a lot about the Garlic Festival and heard for the first time that they're having some financial challenges that are affecting the Garlic Festival. I'm sure that's an interest to all of us because it's a great event that's really good for our community. So we're actually looking at ways that we can help them out, maybe through parking or, ways to reduce some of their cost. Of course, we have to charge for space, but I'm sure that there's some things that we can do to help keep the Garlic Festival in our town. I'm a member of the CalSOAP Governing Board, and I've written to you a couple times about CalSOAP has been in our district for 15 years. CalSOAP's a program that helps high school students who have not had a member of their family go to college. So these are first-generation college students with all the steps that it takes to go to college. That includes taking what classes to take, how to apply for scholarships, how to apply to colleges. And it's a very effective program. Unfortunately, the governing board at the state level has decided to add a couple more regions to CalSOAP. And I understand why regions that don't have it would want it, because it's a very effective program. But right now what they're considering is reallocating the existing funds to all the regions plus the 2 new ones, which would have a dramatic impact on our funding. So we're going through a real advocacy process right now. I talked to Assemblyman Rivas yesterday. We're calling everybody under the sun about this because we don't want our CalSOAP program to be reduced in any way because it's such an effective program. all our staff in the room know that we had a staff development day a couple weeks ago on January 25th, and there were numerous offerings. Just to show the public, there are pages and pages of offerings that were provided for our staff. I was able to stop by many of them, and I was very impressed with the quality of our staff development. It just gets better every time we do it. And I want to thank Kathleen and Deb. We're gone to kind of a new format where we offer sort of a menu of offerings, and people choose the things that they want to go to and need. And that seems to be well received. So we're moving more in that direction, and we got a lot of good feedback about that. As you know from prior board meetings, we have formed a superintendent's advisory committee on closing schools. We had our first meeting on January 25th, and there are about 15 members on that committee. We had a good meeting. Both Mark and James were there. And we have an upcoming meeting on March 1st. We're going to meet monthly till the end of the school year. We'll be back to the board by the end of the year just to tell you where we are, give you an update on the progress of the committee. And then in August, we plan to come to the board with a recommendation after we see our enrollment for the next school year. I want to emphasize to the public and everyone who's listening to this tape, the committee has not taken any action, nor has the board, on closing a school or which school. This is the very preliminary stages of a long process to study the issue and make a decision whether to close a school and which one. So no decisions have been made at this time. I know there are some rumors floating around out there that certain schools are going to be closed. That couldn't be further from the truth. We do not have any plan at this point to close the school. We're going to study it for 6 months, and then the board will deliberate, I'm sure, at a number of meetings. We'll have public meetings, public hearings, where we invite parents from any school that may be affected down the road. But right now, we're in the very early stages of meeting and gathering information. January 30th to February 1st, I did put in my weekly report, but for everybody else, I attended the annual Superintendent's Symposium in Monterey. It was a particularly good symposium this year, a lot of really good workshops. For instance, I went to workshops on cybersecurity, preparing for the next recession, updates on the state budget, new legislation in our schools. There's literally hundreds of new laws that went into effect January 1. I went to one on the California dashboard, which you're going to hear about later. And I went to a really good workshop about, at the time it was called Fatal School Violence Toolkit. The title of the toolkit's been changed. But anyway, I connected Cheryl to that toolkit. And the good news is we're already doing most of what they recommend. There's a couple of things that we can do to improve what we're doing. I went to hear 4 keynote speakers, and one of them just resonated with me so strongly. Colonel Arthur Athens, retired colonel who served for many years, has 10 kids of his own. I thought that was interesting. Who has 10 kids anymore? But he does. But what he spoke about was integrity, and that's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and I thought it was one of the best talks I've heard in years. So that was the conference. We had a wonderful event on February 2nd. Actually, we didn't. The Gilroy Chamber of Commerce Spice of Life Awards, and we had 2 people who were recipients, and we were very proud of both of them. Emily Diaz, an outstanding Christopher High School teacher, was recognized as the Educator of the Year. She's right in the middle, next to her husband, Enrique. And then Brandon Kruger is an incredible student at GECA, and he gave probably one of the best student speeches we've heard over the years going to that event. So it was really well done. I was at Rotary on February 5th. On an annual basis, Rotary gives out, it's called the Day of Giving, Charitable Giving Day at Rotary. And basically, Rotary raises money at 2 major events a year, which I'm sure many of you have attended. The wine tent at the Garlic Festival is a major fundraiser for Rotary, and the other is the flower sale in April. And I go to both, work at both those. Anyway, they raise a lot of money, and one day a year they give that money away. And I was so proud again to be sitting in the audience because there was well over $50,000 given out that day, and I bet 75% of it was to the school district, to programs and teachers in the school district. So that's really cool. I attended a meeting last week. I don't know how many of you have been following the sale of St. Louis, what's happening with that, and I wanted to know so I'd be informed about what was happening. So the Gilroy Chamber put on an event with the president or CEO of the hospital came and spoke about what's happening with the sale, and it should be happening in the next week or so, the sale to the county. What's significant about that is it means the hospital would stay open and it would stay here locally, which is good for us. We had, what's the next picture? I'm going to skip some of this because this is too long. So the next one is Ken Christopher in the center next to me is from the Christopher family. The Christopher family is so generous and has helped the district in so many ways. So now we have the younger generation of the Christopher family, Ken, who's made 2 donations to the district in the last month. First to Christopher High, I think that one was around $4,000 or $5,000, and now to Gilroy High for a little over $12,000. The purpose of his donations, and he gave me the check that day, is to cover school lunches where students and their families can't pay for their school lunches. And he heard, I can't remember how he heard about it, but it really resonated with him, and he wanted to do something about it. We serve every student every day, whether they can pay or not, and that costs money. So those add up. $4,000 at Christopher, $12,000 at Gilroy High. He's covering both of those, and we are really pleased that he's agreed to do that. We had a board retreat Saturday just for the public once a year. We get together, the school board, myself, and a facilitator, and we talk about various topics impacting the district. We had a really good day last Saturday, got a lot done. Monday night we had our elementary reclassification ceremony. It's one of my favorite events all year, the elementary and secondary reclassification ceremony, where we recognize students from all of our schools who have met, English learners who have met the reclassification criteria to be redesignated. Those are technical terms. It means basically that they've met a certain proficiency level in both English and Spanish to be, or in English to be reclassified. And it's a wonderful event. As you can see, they get all dressed up. Their families come. That room was packed with family members celebrating with us their redesignation. Yesterday was a superintendent's meeting, which I drove through pouring rain and was thinking, why am I doing this? But anyway, it was worth it because we had a special speaker. In fact, I took extensive notes from AXA, from the Government Relations Committee, Edward Zuetta, and it was very informative. And I shared my notes with Alvaro and Paul because there were 7 major categories. It was called 7 Things Superintendents Need to Know Now. So it was really, really good talk. And let's see, I talked about Robert Rivas already. I'm calling a couple others. I don't even remember who they are, but we're trying to reach out to all of our local legislators, and I'm hoping that when our board members go to Sacramento, you'll do the same. And I have some talking points on CalSOAP that you can take with you.
Thank you.
As you know, we visit school sites, and in the middle of the year, we do what's called our academic program survey visits. We've just finished those. So we've just finished with ADB on Tuesday. So the APS visits are over. And on the screen, you'll see shortly upcoming events. So I'm attending. I've been invited to attend what they're calling an Apple executive briefing. I'm only going on the 28th. The 27th is just dinner in the evening. So I'm going on the 28th. And I've not attended one of these before, so I'm really interested what they're going to be saying to superintendents. And then, as I mentioned, the Superintendent's Advisory Committee on Closing Schools' next meeting is March 1st. That same day, which is a really fun event, and I hope all of you will read at one of our elementary schools. We have the Read Across America read-in on March 1st. It's to celebrate Dr. Seuss's birthday. And all of us will be reading at a school. We hope you will be able to let us know if you can read at a school, and we'll connect you with the school. They give you the book. All you have to do is sit and read, and the kids love it. And another great event coming up is the Future Chefs competition on March 6th. If you haven't been, you got to go. It is so much fun to watch kids actually cook. I forgot what the focus is this year. There's always a focus. But they create a recipe from scratch and they cook it there, and it's a competition. It's a really fun event. And please, if you can come to the Run for Fitness on March 16th, hopefully it won't be pouring rain. But even if it is, we're doing it. So that's our day for students throughout our district to come and run certain distances at Gilroy High. It's a great event. And that concludes my report, and I left some things out.
Thank you very much.
Right.
You keep busy, don't you?
Yes, all the time.
Okay. This brings us to item 5, the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion.
Move approval. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Passes unanimously. Next, item 6, action information items. 6A, AB 1200, public disclosure of tentative agreement between the Gilroy Federation of Paraeducators and Gilroy Unified for 1718 year, 1819, and 1920. Mr. Meza.
Thank you, Mr. Pace, President Pace. Good evening, Board. Good evening, Superintendent and members of the public. As you know, AB 1200, Assembly Bill AB 1200, requires our district to publicly disclose the costs associated with a tentative agreement before you take action on such agreement. It's intended for the public to know the costs associated with bargaining unit agreements, and the superintendent and I have to certify that we can afford the costs associated with the tentative agreement for the life and term of the agreement itself. The public disclosure documents are included in your packet, and I'll just walk you through the financial consequences of the agreement as well. And after this item, Assistant Superintendent Winslow will then present the actual tentative agreement for board action. So this is the informational component of it. The agreement calls for a 2% salary increase, retroactive to July 1, 2017. A 2% salary increase effective January 1, 2018. 2% salary increase effective January 1, 2019. And then an increase to the district medical contributions effective January 1, 2020. So again, a multi-year agreement, and the costs associated with that by fiscal year. Remember, we already had embedded a 2% cost associated with all bargaining units establishing with the current year operating budget. So that was already there at a cost of $240. And then the additional dollars that I'll mention right now by fiscal year is added to those costs as well. So for the current fiscal year, an additional $57,620 is added to that. Next year, the additional costs are $190,000, and then the last and final year is an additional $266,268. That's the total cost of the agreement, combined with the hard cap increases that take place into the 1920 fiscal year. This is just an informational item.
Thank you for the information. Moving on to item 6B, approval of the tentative agreement between the Gilroy Federation of Paraeducators and Gilroy Unified. Mr. Winslow.
Good evening, Board Trustees, Superintendent Flores. I'm here joined today with the President of the Gilroy Federation of Paraeducators, Artie O'Connor, and we're here today jointly to present to the Board of Education a recommendation for you to approve a tentative agreement. As Alvaro has laid out the financials, but this is a 3-year agreement that will last us to 2020, and we've provided you with the entire tentative agreement, which not only has the outline of those financials, but also indicates changes to language that are non-monetary and clean up some of those other items. And before you take any type of action, I know Artie would love to address the board directly. Then just bend it down.
Okay. Good evening, Superintendent Flores, President Pace, board members. On behalf of the Gilroy Federation of Paraeducators, I want to thank the school district negotiating team for their work. Negotiations were conducted in an atmosphere of respect, even when we disagreed, and we did disagree sometimes. I especially want to acknowledge the work of our union's negotiating team members, Maria Sorensen, Anna Maria Dalton, Cheryl Chagoya, Valerie Sweeney, and Jane Dolan. It is my great honor to work alongside them for the best interests of our unit. And I want to recognize the work of Gilroy Unified's paraeducators and also acknowledge the diversity of the work that we all do across the district. We are a vital component of Gilroy Unified, serving our students' and families' needs, and we are dedicated to their education and well-being. So thank you again, and happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the tentative agreement.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank
Passes
you.
Unanimously. Okay, item C, Local Control Accountability Plan, LCAP, mid-year review. Staff will present.
Good evening. While we're waiting.
Hello.
Hello. While we're waiting to get our presentation ready, good evening, President Pace, members of the board, Dr. Flores. Tonight we're going to be presenting to you the mid-year review for our LCAP, Local Control Accountability Plan. And during the presentation, we are going to share with you some key highlights about progress made to date on our LCAP goals.
Am I pushing the button?
Yeah, good. Yeah. So as many of you are aware, we have 5 main LCAP goals, and these are the goals listed here. These goals are in alignment with the state priorities and also with board goals. So here's goal number 1, again, preparing students to be, for whatever path they choose, beyond secondary education. And a first area that we spend a lot of time and effort to is professional development, looking at ways that we can support the instructional program. As Dr. Flores mentioned, we've really made a lot of effort to look at the differentiated needs of staff, at the same time aligning the type of professional development to our LCAP goals. And secondary actually has ventured further into this arena with some personalized learning pathways, and you'll see an example of that presently. Here is the most recent professional development for elementary, in which we did provide choices, as Dr. Flores mentioned, very well received by staff. It's a little more trickier to organize, but actually was very, very exciting to see. We got lots of positive comments. They could choose AM or PM sessions. And here's the whole website for the secondary professional development. And again, they've been doing this for a couple of years in terms of choice and looking at, obviously, of larger staff members, a lot of different needs in terms of departments and needs, but also this new personalized learning pathways in which staff members can choose different professional development activities. Other than staff development days, we have obviously a lot of different ways that we support effective instruction. So it's not just those one-shot times where they have a professional development day, but it happens during staff meetings, it happens with our coaches and instructional specialists, it happens obviously through our leaders who are conducting classroom walkthroughs and visits, doing an analysis of that data. We have peers who are supporting each other, and also the evaluation process. You heard about the evaluation process that's been changed, and our administrators really appreciate it, as do our teachers, because it is a growth model, and it gives a lot of feedback. I just included a couple of quotes here. The elementary principals have been involved in instructional rounds training this year. They really like it. And that one quote is from one of our leaders about the opportunities for them to dialogue about learning and what's happening in classrooms. And then a teacher quote about being the choice for professional development.
And this slide shows you the responses that we've gotten on our professional development. and the things that we're working on. We do provide a variety, and the professional development does not just include those 3 days. It is about the instructional specialists, the academic coaches, our SEAL coaches, all the different methods that we use to, in fact, provide professional development. And as you can see, the challenge for us is that we often get mixed responses on different items. So when you look at the instructional specialist or academic coach, it truly is split down the middle in terms of whether they believe that it has helped them or not. So we're right, about 50-50 there. So it does make it a challenge for us as we are trying to plan to please all of the members of the district. There. We froze. Now go. There we go. So we've been working a lot on NGSS this year, and we are in the process of learning still, and I know you might be saying, but wait a minute, I've heard about these next generation science standards for years, and that's true. So we have been talking about it for years, but we took a huge leap forward this year in the fact that our publishers now have actually come out with materials. So it has taken them almost a decade to get us materials, but we do finally have them. And with that, there is quite an extensive process to review the materials that we might be adopting in the future. But that process has been wonderful because it really delves deep into the standards and what access our students have through the materials. So it has actually been a wonderful professional development, and that we will be rolling out to our staff. The other big thing for this year is we have something called Gizmos, and it is as fun as it sounds. So it is a computerized program that basically allows our staff to do virtual labs in the classroom. So there are certain labs that we cannot do, for example, at middle school, because it's very hard to set up a full lab in 45 minutes. For students. So with Gizmos, everything is set up for you. The students can go on and can experience the full lab in that time without the setup and the breakdown for the teacher. So it provides a lot more opportunity for lab experiences for our students. Our teachers just had a Gizmo training yesterday, and they're actually excited because it now is expanding into the world of math and how math and science work together. So we are excited to roll this out with our math teachers as well and use it on a broader scale. Right now it's a set of pilot teachers, but it was impossible to contain them as pilots because they kept going to their peers saying, you have to use this. So we, in fact, had to go from a pilot to a more full-scale implementation of the program.
Saying to Mr. Pace that when the spring visits are starting, when we're at a middle school, we'll make sure they see Gizmos.
Absolutely.
It's a really cool program.
Yeah, so for example, I'm sure many of you either remember from your experience or from students you know the plant lab where they watch a plant grow and they use different things to help it grow. Well, now instead of it taking weeks or sometimes longer for that to happen, they can do it normally within a 2-day lab and get the same effect with changing the elements. So they can say that they want to use soda as their fluid source, for example, and see what the effects would be compared to water or other things. So they can do all of those things in a shorter amount of time. Okay. Ready?
She's doing it.
Oh, she's doing it?
Yeah,
Did I just mess up?
Yeah.
Sorry. So with our 21st century skills, we have brought on, as you know, you approved our iSchool initiative. So we just finished 5 days of Escape the Bus. So we were able to have approximately 80 students and about 12 teachers at Christopher High School, Gilroy High School, Solorzano, South Valley, and Brownell experience the Escape the Bus. And I would like to tell you that it was all fun and enjoyable, but some of our folks are more more competitive than others. So I do want to let you know that Gilroy High School, one of their teams, not only broke the Gilroy record, they broke the iSchool record by completing the 30-minute challenge with 8 minutes left.
Go Mustangs.
So, so the average completion time for those that completed the challenge had about 20 seconds left, was the average. So it was a wonderful experience. We got a lot of very positive feedback. Not one student came out saying they didn't enjoy it and how they would love to have more activities like this. And it was great to see the students and the teachers because they were a team. The teachers participated just as the students did. And it was nice for the teachers to see how you can do approximately 6 different problem-based activities in a 30-minute time period. So it's really about showing the teachers and opening up their thought process to see how could I do some problem-based learning within my class without having to change every lesson I do to be a problem-based lesson. So just doing it on smaller little scales. And it was interesting listening to the students come out telling their teachers how they need to do this in their classroom. So in fact, that was the exciting thing was the students were saying, well, with what we're doing right now in our class, here's what we could do. So I think the kids are going to go back and do some lesson planning for their teachers. So the next step is the Student Leading Education program that starts March 4th with our high schools and then March 6th with our middle schools, where we will be training our students as well as our teacher advisors to get ready for the student leading education groups, which will be starting with after-school club groups for next year. And that's where they will be creating their own set of problems and then pitching those problems kind of like a Shark Tank to their administrators, the superintendent, and if board members are available, when I have those dates, I'll send them to you. So they do have to do a formal presentation in order to get their problems approved. I forget she's doing that. So the next is our college and career. As you know, we have had a college readiness grant, and we have been using those funds to support our students in a variety of ways. So the big one is getting California Colleges, which is a computer-based program that allows students to go on and not only really kind of track their own progress from middle school through high school, but also it's a kind of a warehouse where they can do resumes, they can do add letters of recommendation, they can do their own personal statements, so they can use it for more than just college focus, but also for career and looking for work. So we've worked really hard to get all of our students on board, and I'm very proud of our ACs and our counselors at the site because we do have about 95% of our students who now have an active account in the program. And active means that they have to do more than just log in, they actually have to complete activities within the program. So currently from 6th grade through 12th, 95% of our students have been on the system in some way or another. We also expanded PSAT this year, and we offered it to 8th grade. And some people said, well, they might be young, but the 8th graders actually had a wonderful experience because they said they had never experienced that type of test. So it was good for them to see that, one, this is kind of what high school, the step to high school, but also this is the next step in your career planning. And we've really been working on kind of changing the mindset that our district is not college focused. Our district is career focused, but many careers require college. So it's getting them to see what are those careers that they're interested in doing, and then setting that plan and seeing what type of schooling after high school they might need to be successful in those careers. The PSAT, when they get the feedback, also helps them and gives them some direction about what their strengths are to be able to add to that career focus. We are working very hard on our CTE pathways And what that means is that we are offering students not only the beginning level of a course, but then capstones. Our goal is to be able to offer programs where they can actually be certified by the time they finish high school, which will give them the ability to go straight into the workforce in several careers. We're not quite there yet, but we are working in that direction, and we have a wonderful working relationship with Glen to help us with that mission. And then with A through G, our schools went from 39% ready, which means, remember, A through G requires that they have C's or better. D's don't count. So we went from 39% in 2017 to 47% in 2018. So we're very proud of that as well. Our students are meeting the rigorous expectations, and we expect to see that number continue to go up. So the next goal is providing equitable support for all learners. And really it's about doing strong language and literacy foundations. And a big part of this is SEAL, so I'm going to let Kathleen talk a little bit more, as she's more well-versed in that than I am.
So we continue with the implementation of SEAL. Right now we're in the process of doing what's called depth of implementation. So depth of implementation is a process that SEAL takes us through as the principals, as leaders. We'll look at how are we doing with implementation, because we have our cohorts that have actually completed. So it's 3 years of training, so two full years of the module training. There are 3 modules each year. And the third year is a sustainability year. They're fine-tuning. They're still working together. And then, of course, sustainability throughout. So it's a really good time for us to take stock and kind of evaluate ourselves about what is working, what's not. So we just been working on that as leaders together. And of course, we have a number of new teachers. So we're always going to have kind of a little bit of that catch up to support them. But we're very proud of and I know many of you have been out to the sites and seen that and seen the work of SEAL, but we're proud of the fact that there's really a culture amongst our teachers of collaboration because of SEAL, and of working together, of creating, and there's excitement. So you'll see a lot more consistency of practice, and it's there's a lot of different benefits. I can't spend all that time going on it now, but I just wanted to share with you kind of our next steps in that evaluation. There is an external evaluation that we're participating in through Loyola Marymount as well. And so for example, they just conducted an interview with me. They go out and they have certain teachers that they're following, and they do take data on that. So that is another aspect of the SEAL implementation.
And go back for one second.
Yeah,
so for middle school, we've actually changed the structure of the middle school day this year to provide support during the school day in math and English. So the school has always been structured to give 2 blocks for math and 2 blocks for English. And what we've worked on is really making it so the core content is taught during one of those blocks. The second block is then differentiated for enrichment and support. This is the first year that we are implementing, so it is still in its infancy, but we have had good results so far with the teachers and the students being able to differentiate and support the students. This is also time when we can work with our students who may need some more intensive support with some pull-out services for them. So for supporting our students with credit recovery, we did increase last year the summer school offerings to be able to provide more services for our students who were not passing their courses. We also note in here our students who are in Math 2 and have passed, and in Math 3. And the reason why we use those benchmarks is because Math 3 is kind of the indicator for us for those students that are on track. And it's Math 3 by 11th grade because math is a 3-year requirement. And if they're on track, they've taken Math 1 their freshman year, Math 2 their sophomore year, and Math 3 their junior year. And you'll see here that 84% of our students are on track. That doesn't mean that the other ones will not graduate on time. It simply means they may need that extra year, that 4th year, to complete that Math 3 requirement. We also continue to give our MAP assessments for benchmarks checks for our 9th and 10th grade students to provide local data for our teachers to be able to improve instruction. We're also working to provide credit recovery options during the school year, and currently we have a 0 period and 7th period offering at Gilroy High and Christopher High. That is somewhat successful. We are struggling with that because it is a challenge to get our students there who need credit recovery before or after school. So we're actually researching ways that we can implement support like we have in the middle school during the high school day. So for monitoring progress, we do a lot of what are called CASP interims, and CASP is our statewide test. They actually provide us with sample test questions for our students to see how well prepared they are to master the standards. We use those as some of our local assessments to be able, again, to adjust instruction based on the student's mastery of those skills. We also use a program called EDIMS at the secondary level for many of our departments to also provide those local assessments. We also use that to help monitor our English learners and see how they are doing in their courses, and again, to adjust instruction. So for addressing the needs of English learners, at the secondary, we have 4 what are called early release days. So we have a 2-hour workshop, basically, for our teachers, where they spend a minimum of 1 of those hours focusing on strategies to assist our English learners in the classroom. A lot of those strategies are good for all of our students, but they are critical for our English learners. And there are many different strategies and topics, and our instructional specialists lead all of those sessions. Keep going. Yep, go through school culture. So for student engagement, please remember that student engagement based on the state definition is attendance. Okay, so everybody says, well, wait a minute, attendance, engagement, seems strange, but that is the state definition. So we focus on our attendance and our support for truancy. So we have restructured as we have eliminated 1 position, or actually I should say we did not fill 1 position, and we have restructured to provide support using right now 3 different people to meet those needs, which is actually going very well because we have one person focusing on SARB and mediation and another person focusing on truancy. So we now have kind of 2 different levels. So this is new for our restructuring, but so far we have had for our mediations with our families, we have had wonderful turnouts. In fact, at the last one, we only had 1 family not attend. All the rest were there, which is wonderful for a SARB meeting. So it is difficult to get our students who are absent from school to actually attend these meetings. So it's been going very well. We're also continuing with our implementation of PBIS, and we have restructured that as well to give support, and the sites have taken on more leadership at their own personal sites with this change in structure. Your turn.
So go for us, high quality staff, and clearly that's all of our business, and the referencing the professional development and all we do to support staff, but also in terms of new teachers, we do have a new online induction program that is actually going very well, and I'm sure that Mr. Winslow could talk about that one. But the new teachers have a distance learning person or a mentor that they are assigned, and they work through that person. I know they upload videos of their instruction. There's a lot of requirements, but this is to support them with their credentialing requirements. We do take seriously the role of, supporting new teachers. I know specifically at the elementary level, we've had our academic coaches out there really providing some specialized PD. Classroom management is always a big area, so we've done a little series of after-school sessions on classroom management, introduction to all the curricular areas so that they are, at least getting up to speed on that, and then just some kind of one-on-one support, ongoing support for new teachers. I know at secondary level also many of the department chairs and people are supporting our new teachers. And then in terms of recruitment, of course, our human resources department is doing a great job with that. And there's an example here with the next one of the new flyer that they developed that is really showcasing Gilroy Unified. So I know this was exciting that Melanie and Paul put together when they go out to recruit. There's a lot to be proud of there. And now I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Mesa.
Thank you, Kathleen. So what are we doing to support the Goal 5 of well-maintained facilities? Noting that the state only allocates $332,000 total to our district, and you think of the many facilities, and just a roof itself could cost well over that for an entire campus. So $332,000 to maintain well facilities from the state is then matched, and more than matched, by the governing board with $380,000 out of the general fund, an allocation of routine restricted maintenance of $3.6 million, and then the voters generously have approved our general obligation bonds. The last one for Measure E for $170 million, which issued 60. So a lot of these are multi-funded. Those funds are restricted to facilities, so we can only use them for facility purposes. And you can see various examples of how we maintain our facilities for our students and staff to make sure that they have a good learning environment, working environment to thrive in. A couple of examples that I'll know, the major ones, underground gas systems at Solorzano, of course, that's a key safety issue. We often come to those to the board as ratification items because we just don't wait on those things. Heating and cooling, stadium lights and repairs, again, focus on safety-related items. Outdoor canopies and outdoor lunch table replacements, things that make students safer, make the campus more usable and friendly for them. And weed abatement, our superintendent has led the way on getting rid of Roundup and harmful chemicals. So all the weed abatement that you see there is all natural, organic stuff. In fact, the last couple of years we have not registered with the DPIR, the industrial pest control folks, on any substances that would require us to post. The only exception to that would be our student did a wonderful job at recapturing what happened at the flea at Mount Madonna, and we hired a professional for that. We posted on every door, on the fence, and we did it by the book. And then we took precautionary measures of additional days, if not weeks, to bring in staff and our students back. So we handle that with great care.
Okay, and so although we're in the thick of really the LCAP development and review process, really the whole process is cyclical and it's happening all year with our revisions, our implementation, and our review. So we, with this mid-year review, we're using the same process with our leaders. We looked at data, all different types of data, and how are we doing, and asked for an honest appraisal from them in terms of what's happening at their site level, and then by level, what are our trends and what are we noticing, and then we begin the process of looking at what actions we need to adjust. At the same time, as you know, we conducted the LCAP survey, and now we're in the process of doing all of our LCAP stakeholder meetings on the site and at the district level, and then we're gathering additional data and additional input to be able to incorporate into the new LCAP, which will come to you in May and then again in June. So it keeps going throughout the year. So that concludes our report.
Thank you very much for the report. Are there any questions? Ms. Pisano.
As you know, I had one of the questions on the professional development survey responses, which I just want to reiterate, going through these slides, how much professional development you have done or created for employees, for teachers, and for ELs, and for all kids. And as we know, that those trainings and strategies work for all kids. So I just find it curious that 65% say that, yes, they've been given support for ELs, but only 43% say that they've been given support for kids who are below grade level.
Yeah,
And one thing that we're working on this year, especially with the differentiated model for teachers, is it's one thing to provide the professional development. It's another to then take that back and adjust instruction and having time to do that. So part of the new model is actually giving them time for what they've learned in the session, then to go work with their counterparts immediately so that they can incorporate those ideas into lessons that they'll use within the next week or two. We have found that if teachers implement what they've learned immediately, there is a higher chance that they will continue using it.
Right.
Where if they do not, then it's one of those out of sight, out of mind, and they then don't have the time to go back and plan for it. So that's one of the reasons why we're restructuring.
Well, and 72% of them said that they had time for collaboration, which I think is great.
Right. And in terms,
so there's some kind of a disconnect here.
Yeah. In terms
of
struggling students, actually the professional development has addressed that. Our most recent one, for example, was geared for like second and third grade teachers who have students in their classroom, and they do have those students who are still either non-readers or very low readers, and again, very well received. But sometimes they don't put together and say, wait, I did have that. And again, it's complex. It's not something that after one session they're going to necessarily be able to implement. But that whole strand, along with designated ELD, has continued through all of our professional development.
I have a couple more questions. Shall I just go on?
Please go.
Okay. PSAT, I think it's great that we're offering it to 8th and 10th graders. What struck me today, and I didn't give you this ahead of time, I apologize because I just saw it tonight in my head. Do we have any kind of an equitable vocational tool? We have PSAT for college, but is there one that our kids, decades ago, we used to have kids take the ASVAB.
And they still do. They do. We still have the ASVAB at the high school level. We also are incorporating new, and I'm sorry I don't have the name of it with me, but some new assessment tools through our career tech courses that are those exams to see how well they have mastered not only the content standards, but in the application side of it. So we are implementing those as well through those courses. With California colleges, they also have some tools to look at their strengths and weaknesses within the job field and what good careers might be for them based on how they answer certain questions.
Good, excellent. And my last question is, on your slide you had the number of kids that had passed Math 2, the number of sophomores that had passed Math 2. But for the Math 3, you had 84% of the 11th graders are enrolled.
Correct.
How many of them are past it for semester 1?
So we did not tabulate how many have passed at this point. So we were in the process of this. That is information that we gather. But honestly, it's that second semester data that is more crucial because we do have some support for the students that were not successful first semester. So it's second semester and how many can go on that we look at. So we do collect it, but that is the data that we'll be reporting to you of how many have successfully completed.
So when you're saying second semester, you're talking Math 3 second semester?
Correct.
Okay.
In June.
Thank you. That's it for me.
I want to commend you for the presentation, for the data. It was well presented. I really appreciate it. And also for the flyer, for GUSD flyer, that looks really nice. I at a glance, it's exactly what you want to see. And the iSchool initiative, the bus, I happened to be on campus at Christopher High for a totally different thing, and I happened to stumble upon it. It was very prominently placed and looked really, and I got to see in the office the students as they were preparing to go to the bus, and they were obviously really excited, so
cool.
Really cool. So I wanted to commend you for that.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, thank you very much for this informational item.
Thank you.
Next up, item D, approve budget reductions for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. Mr. Meza.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Board. Good evening, Superintendent. Again, before we start with the actual proposed budget reductions, I just want to provide a little bit of background because it's not up there anyway. Remember, we're among 26 districts in the county that find ourselves in declining enrollment. And obviously, we're funded on average daily attendance, and enrollment is very correlated with average daily attendance. And the last couple of years, this year and last year, we lost $3.7 million of ongoing revenue. And we have been committed, as we've looked at the survey results, the top responses were around high-quality teachers and maintaining high-quality teachers. And since the start of LCFF in 2013-14, we have been committed to maintaining high-quality staff by increasing salary raises. So I tally that up, going all the way back to 13-14, all the way through this tentative agreement, including the paras that we just approved, and it'd be 24% ongoing salary increases, total compensation increases, 21% on salary, and the 3% on benefits, or equivalent of to the high caps. That doesn't even include a 3% one-time spread over 2 years with implementation of Common Core. So we've provided and the board has demonstrated a high bar and a high commitment to maintaining high-quality staff. So we do have to address, though, the shortfall, the $3.7 million shortfall of revenues, as our expenses are only going to continue to increase. We are thankful that the governor has indicated and showed that he's willing to look at the STRS component of it. That's the pension for certificated folks that we're required to pay. That effectively only buys down the rate for 2 years in a row. And because it's a January proposal, who knows if that's going to actually be there for the enacted budget. So that's not actually in my multi-year projection. So we're faced with declining revenues and higher ongoing costs. With declining enrollment, we have to make these tough decisions, and we're to a point where none of these cuts are easy. Remember, we took $720,000+ cut into this operating budget already. So we stand here before you as a team. Cabinet put a lot of thought and effort into it. We've looked at the results from the first survey that we ran, but this is really a combination of a year, if not more, of thoughtful planning, looking at the feedback that we've been getting, and just going to work in terms of making tough decisions and tough recommendations for you to take here tonight. The very first one is to address staffing, of course. So we were projected to increase this year. It didn't happen. So we find ourselves overstaffed in some areas when that happens, right? Because we were projecting 40 growth or so, and it didn't happen.
You're talking about students?
Students, yes, thank you. 40 net students throughout the district, which was essentially flat, but that didn't materialize. So we find ourselves in a subsequent year of decline by triple digits. So what we've done, working very closely with Mr. Winslow, is looking at our staffing needs and projecting what we can do to maintain our ratios, but really scale down the staffing so that we can remain solvent as these ongoing costs are rising faster than our revenues. So the first line item is $1,200,000, just really looking at the collective bargaining agreements and maintaining those. Not going over them, but maintaining those, because we're scaling down on the enrollment picture.
Mr. Mesa,
yes.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Is that first line item, I'm assuming that that's only certificated staff?
Correct, yes. Thank you, Trustee Pisano. That's certificated staff only. And there's some other areas, of course, related to full-time equivalent reductions that you'll see. Thank you for mentioning that, because it's really hard to look at your budget when 87% of your total budget is tied up in salary and benefits. It's just really not possible to cut $3 million almost from your budget without really impacting salary and benefits, because we have to have a budget to maintain the lights on and pay for our internet connection, etc. So that first line item is certificated staff. The second thing that we're doing and this is really broadly speaking, where we have a position that's budgeted and a vacancy occurs, we're going to take a hard look at that in cabinet, and we're going to see if we can sustain without that position, or if there's an opportunity to restructure departments, operations, to make sure that we take advantage of those, so that we are not then forced to bring you action to lay off a current employee that's earning a wage and salary from our district. So, and that's the case with the second one, where we have budgeted positions in the Information Technology Department. And this is initially, the concept of the growth in technology was initiated with a tentative agreement that we had with the classified union a couple of years ago, where we had built in the budget one extra FTE per year. That's when we were thinking we were going to grow. And of course, the department always has needs, but with downsizing enrollment, we think that would be a good thing for us not to go and look at an existing employee and having to go through the layoff process. That vacancy is there. No one has filled them in. It's just a good practice to do that to avoid a true layoff. Summer school, this is one item that has been revised. You remember this list was over $3.2 million or $3.3 million initially in September when we brought it to you. It included at that point a couple of areas of special ed, but we've since decided, smartly so, to take them out based on board direction and feedback, because our special ed expenditures have continually going up, not because of management issues, just really because of the nature of special ed, the services that we have to provide, given the IEP obligations that we have to meet. So that was the first adjustment that we made. We've excluded special ed savings from this altogether. That's not to say that we're not going to try to do what's right for kids and do what's right for the district at the same time, but they're just not included in here. The second one, an important revision to the reduction was line item 3, reduce summer school savings. We had targeted $250,000 annually. We've taken a hard look at that, and we can, all these numbers we're confident in, and now we're confident on that summer school reduction of $100,000. We're going to continue, obviously, to target 11th and 12th grade students, because we don't want our graduation dropout rate to have an impact. We want kids to graduate. That's our core mission, and we feel confident that can and still deliver. There's some transportation components, and there's a whole bunch of things that we're going to still continue to do to make sure we get kids there. And that services is here as well for me in case there's questions about the textbooks as well. But several meetings ago, we do have a plan to implement textbook adoptions. It's expensive. It's over $5 or $6 million spread over years. And we've taken a look at that allocation, that plan, that adoption cycle. Again, declining enrollment means lower number of needs. So we revised that as well to reflect the fact that the orders, the quantities are going to be less as well. And there's some consumable issues and things that we've taken account as well. So that we feel confident on a $250,000 reduction annually. These are all annual amounts. They're ongoing reductions, and that's important. And the additional piece, line item 5, please stop me if there's any questions. I just want to go through it delicately because you're being asked to take action on this tonight. The 5th line item is a 2.0 reduction in full-time equivalent in instructional specialists. We call them teacher on special assignments. There's academic coaches and I forget what other instructional specialists. These are COs. There's different categories and names. So that's why I'm always careful when I'm asked to tabulate FTEs, because there's different categories. But we do feel confident we can still deliver these services based on this cut. It's not easy. None of these are easy. It has impacted services as well that we deliver. But we can confidently say that we can save that $246,000 going into next year while still providing some service.
I have a question going back up to number 3. Sorry, I'm a little slow. Focus on 11th and 12th grade. Does that mean only 11th and 12th graders will be in summer school?
No, there'll still be even special ed component on that. But
well,
this is
outside of special ed, yes, because that's on an IEP.
This is why I asked that services to be up here with
general ed.
for the general education program, that is what we are reducing. We are not reducing special ed because that is dictated by the IEP. So for our general ed program, the focus is 11 and 12. Now, what that means is we will be offering the courses that are needed for the 11th and 12th graders. If there is space available, then we can offer some of those spaces to our 10th graders if needed, but they will be very limited. Where over the past couple of years, we have been able to expand and offer larger numbers of classes for our 10th graders. So that is the big adjustment.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No, thank you. And please stop us. You're being asked to take action today, so this is a good time to answer questions. So line 6, terminate contract with Graduation Alliance. They were formerly known as Advanced Path. They primarily focus on 11th and 12th graders. But we're going to do it in-house, and we're going to focus on 9th through 12th grade, so all grade level spans. We're doing it in-house. Although this is a savings, there will be some FTE, full-time equivalent, impact to Graduation Alliance, as we're going to serve that model totally separate, but spreading that 9 through 12. Eliminate program administrator, I think that was referred to during the LCAP presentation. That's the net savings. We already have the 3 folks that are helping us with the various responsibilities. That model is working, but it is a transition year, and it's a tough one, but it is a transition year for us as well. Reductions to classified and paras, again, any vacancies that we have throughout the year, and throughout the year we quite frankly do have many for various reasons, we're going to reevaluate them again in cabinet throughout the year until the enrollment picture starts to change to more of what we had been experiencing for the last 20 years, more of a normal anticipated flow of students coming in. We'll evaluate every vacancy before it gets posted and filled. We're switching to, this is a good example of us knowing of a retirement and then reevaluating the operation. And this is the case here in this one. We're going to go to just-in-time delivery. Again, a transition year for us, our purchasing department, the sites, ed services, myself, we'll all have to be knowing that next year, starting already, we're changing the way we look at our orders and our textbook orders, having them shipped to the sites and being prepared for that shift. That's the savings, the ongoing savings of $77,000. We're also eliminating, and there's various of them that I'll call out, allocation to elementary sites, restructure enrichment funding, restructure ed tech duties, recalculate class size reduction, administrative mentors, all those that I just named, we're focused on leveraging federal funds that we already get with strings attached that are very hard to spend and must be spent on those things, those strings essentially coming from the Fed. So we're going to maximize that. We can always do a better job of spending those restricted funds so that at the end of the year when we close our books, we don't have all this carryover in state and federal sources while the general fund is being hatched away for declining enrollment. So we're going to be doing a much better job in just maximizing that, so we limit to the greatest extent possible carryover in those funds. So that's what you see here in this various categories. Those services will be impacted to some extent because how we deliver them has to be a little different to substantiate the federal sources, but they will continue. They won't be identical, but they will continue. But that is a savings to the general fund. And that's the bottom line here. And the other one, the last one on the bottom, LPAC coordination, again, reduce the support, but the duties will be assigned and taken care of, just handled in a different manner. The first total that you see, the $2.9 million, includes savings from the restructure of the fiscal controller, which has undertaken duties of a consultant. But apart from that, the total to the general fund is $2,859,501. And you can see the impact of those savings in the multi-year projection because this is what it's all about. So let me walk through the first round of the cut, which is that $2.8 million is included into the 1920 fiscal year. And you can look at the deficit spending, which is the line that says net increase. towards the bottom of the page. I'll try to highlight it here. The deficit spending is just $575,000, which on a budget of $131 million, that's pretty balanced. That's why we're taking such a measured approach on this one, because we want to balance the budget, recapture the lost revenue, right? And you do that by reducing your budget and bring it into balance, because it can only get worse with declining enrollment. You're always chasing that prior year funding. So this year, we took that $720-something thousand, but that wasn't $3.7 million, so we need to catch up to that number. And that's why you see essentially a balanced budget being presented to you for next year. The reserves look high, yes, but we can't keep up, right? We have to continue to cut until the enrollment picture changes. And so we have another $1 million worth of cut for the following year in 2021, and that brings us to a reserve of 7.6%. I will note that all the revenues, the cost of living adjustment, everything is in here except for the STIRS adjustment. And that's purposeful. Again, it's a January budget proposal. It's a proposal that hasn't ever been done to the legislature. The proposal costs $3 billion overall to the state. It's outside Prop 98. Prop 98 governs the minimum funding of public schools, and is usually looked at from a legislative standpoint as the maximum, not a minimum. So I get nervous anytime there's a proposal that's outside of Prop 98, because the legislature is going to want to hold the governor to that number, the 98 number, as a minimum. So everything that's outside of it, we shouldn't count on it, and we shouldn't plan on it until the enacted budget is approved and signed and enacted into law. So we're maintaining our focus of fiscal stability, around $2.8 million. That's what's before you tonight to take action. And then part of the $1 million, of course, has a lot of light work to do. That's what the school closure is partly about. And then the remaining pieces will be then identified and processed through the development of that budget as soon as we're done with this cycle of 1920. Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
I had one
Mr. Good?
Has our Director of Technology weighed in on the recommended 2 cuts to her department?
We have not asked her to publicly do that. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it's been a priority for the last a number of years. Technology, we've invested how many millions in technology
it's $12 billion in infrastructure, and probably a lot more before then.
And so before I vote to support cutting the positions, I'd just like to hear from the person who has to keep everything running, if she has any comments.
Sure. Marvin?
As we have invested a lot of money in IT, yes, more than $12 million. I think that our department has never been fully staffed. So even before we started the network upgrade, we were not fully staffed. And but that is probably true for the majority of the departments in the state of California. I cannot speak for the rest of the departments outside California. I don't think that we ever will get there. Can we use the help? Absolutely. We have altogether over 12,000 devices that belong only to the district. And, we would like to service better our teachers, and the work will always be there. So
there was one position filled in December, right?
The IT supervisor position.
Yeah, okay.
Jose is here with us in training to support the board meetings.
So basically, things are difficult, but you're getting them done, and not filling those 2 positions is not going to stop things from happening. It's just going to continue to be difficult. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes. It will. They will take time to get done. I don't have a report on how many work orders do we get in a month, for example, because I was not ready to step up to the podium and speak about it. So, yes, we will take time to get the work done, but we will do our best.
Thank you. And I apologize for not asking earlier. We've always had this up there in discussion with CSEA regarding negotiations, but it's never occurred to me until right now. Well, gee, should we ask the person who's responsible for all this what she thinks? Because I mean, I'm sure there's been discussions internally, but it hasn't come up to the board. So before we do this, I mean, if you came up and said it's going to fall apart, then I would have a different idea about where to go. But I'm sorry for calling you up at the last minute, but thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Diaz?
Along the same lines, but you don't have to answer. And in fact, you may not even have the data at this point. But how many more unfilled positions do we have in general? And that, I totally understand we don't have it right now. I didn't ask it before, and I didn't think about it till now. And then, like, the average duration of how long they've been unfilled,
If I had my laptop, I could answer that.
Okay.
But maybe, I don't know if Paul can give you some rough numbers. He sees it every day.
And I totally don't expect it's more of a...
Yeah, I'd like to say none. That would be great if we say we have no vacancies. But currently, if you just break down the classifications, we typically run paraeducator vacancies all year, because they're driven with services. So services change on a daily basis. So if you went into our database, you're going to find those. So at any point you pull our database, you're going to see probably 2 to 3 vacancies. Classified, we have very few vacancies, actually. And if they are vacancies, they're categorically funded, where it wouldn't impact this discussion.
Okay.
The IT ones were the ones that jumped out immediately because those are general fund, and that's why it's coming to as a budget item. And then for teachers, we have a couple, but those vacancies we absolutely need to keep on our books because those are for services as well. But like Alvaro mentioned before, the superintendent's directive to us has been very clear. Any vacancy that opens, it doesn't matter the funding source, comes to cabinet. Yeah. So it's a group discussion to see if we can phase that out to have a cost savings versus any other approach.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Doyle.
Yes, a few years ago, we tried the direct shipment to schools, and it was complete chaos. Invoices weren't handled right. Shipments were made to the wrong schools. How are we going to correct make sure that doesn't happen again by getting rid of the warehouse?
So there's different tools. Like, it came from a district that I oversaw that didn't have a warehouse. And then I came from a district that had a warehouse. I was the CBO, the last district that had a warehouse. There's different tools. You establish effectively users with different permission rights, and we can authorize essentially centrally, no different than the warehouse. We can see the ship to over here rather than the ship to the site as well. So we can set up users depending on what vendor you use. You have visibility into everybody's queue with an ultimate approval process that goes to the district office. Effectively, everything that changes is the ship to address. And we just have to know you can't order pallets of paper. I think I stopped that in my second month here, where I went into the warehouse and there was like pallets and pallets of paper that sat there for 6 months and absorbing space, wasted space from the warehouse. I also didn't do this in isolation. I talked to the guy that runs it, the driver, and he said, if you're not going to blow up the warehouse and increase staff and it's effectively invest in the warehouse, so you do have a warehouse operation with 3 or 4 drivers, more trucks, effectively going more towards that, well, that's not what we need. It'd be best to shut it down. So that was his recommendation to me as well before I even brought it up on the list. So we've taken great care in all those things. And not to say that an order is not going to go wrong. Things will happen. We'll have to transition. We'll work that out. But we'll certainly have the process in place and the checks and balances to prevent those things to the best extent possible.
And also at the school sites, who's going to receive the shipments that's coming in, and who's going to inventory them and put them away?
So they do that now, right? It's just depending on whoever takes it. So Steve will deliver them, and then somebody has to receive them, make sure that they're not damaged, that somebody's responsible for it, because it could get damaged in our own truck by placement there. So we do that already. It's the main focal point of entry where we have trucks out here. The one key thing that changes is we do have a lift. We do have all those heavy-duty equipment here to get that stuff on. So the ordering things have to account for that fact that the schools won't have forklifts. We won't have that. I think if you're asking for what's the most impact, things that we have to look for that in specifically. It's the equipment, how it's going to get in, who's going to deliver it. We have to look at the charge for that. It's incorporated into it. Most of these things are funded by categorical, and we're having a warehouse operation funded by the general fund. Just doesn't sit well when you're cutting and cutting and cutting on the general fund, and most of these orders are coming through categorically funded, and they don't pay their share for that because they simply just pay it right for the product itself, while we're paying for the shipping and handling over here. So that's yet another reason why we looked at this carefully.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, this is one of the most painful things that I've had to do on the board.
Absolutely.
It's much more fun when the budget's increasing. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you, team, for doing more with less over the coming years. And with that, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the reduction.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you, Board. We know this is painful.
Thank you. Right. Moving on to item E, California School Dashboard. Mr. Schrock is going to make something that's hard to understand easy to understand.
It's all pictures. Come on.
All pictures.
All right. Good evening, Dr. Flores, President Pace, and members of the board. This evening, I'm going to present on we're in the third iteration, the third year of the California School Dashboard. This is, as I've spoken before, the accountability system. Back in previous years, we had the AYP for federal accountability with program improvement. We had the API reaching 800. Do I need to actually speak into the mic? We had the API for state accountability, schools reaching 800. And here with the new testing system, with the end of NCLB, now we have the school dashboard, which is the fortunate thing is it's one system to meet both federal and state accountability rather than have kind of two different calculations. You can see the little image down below there is one of the changes that was made in this year's dashboard to a gauge system. So I did mention the accountability for state and federal. What's that?
Yeah, that was the problem.
With understanding, right? Now that we have gauges, everything's perfectly clear. So the gauge system, one of the goals was to have a system that would be perhaps more understandable to parents. Some of the changes they made, and perhaps debatable sometimes. Is it more understandable in some cases? Perhaps yes. Other cases, still a bit complex to understand. But the previous model, those of you who saw it last year, it was the Trivial Pursuit pies, right? With how many pies you had in your little pie container. It's the same colors. They've just moved it to a gauge to kind of measure progress from red all the way over to blue. Oh, yeah, and the multiple measures. So here, I just want to mention the multiple measures, right? The state has moved away from having just focus on test scores of English and language arts to say, yes, we have a measure on English language arts, which is the CASP test each spring. We have a measure on mathematics, but there's a college career readiness measure, which is probably the most complex one for those that affects just high school graduating seniors. The graduation rate, looking at seniors. English learner progress, looking instead of at the CELT test now, looking at the new LPAC test. So that one you can see right now is grayed out because we just gave our first LPAC last spring, and we're giving the second one now. I thought that the next year we'd have a color on English Learner Progress, but a meeting I was at recently said they're going to wait one more year, give one more year of kind of reliability to the LPAC before then the following year but they'll continue to report our results, but not give a color to districts for the LPAC. Then looking at suspension rate for all students and chronic absenteeism. So, avoiding, definitely the state's making an effort to avoid the idea that your district has a number or your school has a number and you're a good school or a bad school because of that, right? Looking and say there's lots of measures that make up what makes success in a school, and you might have some strengths, you might have some weaknesses, and to say it's a number of different things, and obviously avoided the idea of a numbering system. Part of the reason I think that they moved kind of a color coding. Of course, now we say which are the bad colors and the good colors, right? But so you're never going to get completely away from that. But that's what the goal of the state has, right, in this new accountability system. So for Gilroy Unified, this year we were a little flat on our test scores, a little bit of drop in ELA, just a slight uptick on our math scores. So we see that, we're in the orange in those areas. We had a slight uptick in chronic absenteeism suspension rate, so it dropped us into the orange in that year, where a year or so ago we were in the green. So these are just year-to-year measures. And so we'll go through and look at a couple of the specific data points here. But I think one of the things I want to point out is, sometimes we've had some multi-year trends. For example, on suspension rate. About 5 years ago, we were at a 10% suspension rate, and then we dropped down to a 7%. And then for a couple of years, we've been in the 4s. And then this past year, yes, we're up in the 5.5, which puts us into the orange on suspension rate, unfortunately. But, it kind of, we lose track of what's the trend over time, right? So then when I do different reports about CASP scores, for example, what's our multi-year trend there? We're not going to see it in the color here, but it's important for all of us to remember some of those other data points. And we say, okay, and we're going to look at suspension rate in particular and say, okay, what would it take to get out of an orange and back to the green, right, from one year to the next? So this is a snapshot of the actual, we're going to look at snapshots from the actual website, California, or ca-dashboard.org. It's very easy, California dashboard. It's the first thing on a Google search to pull up. And we'll scroll through some of these gauges, but in addition, there's the view all schools. When you're on the page, and you can go school by school to see how each of the schools did. And then there are additional reports. And one of the additional reports are the reports that they've had in the past called the 5x5 grids. And so these 5x5 grids are saying, okay, where do the different groups fall? So you can go through each of the indicators. I pulled up here English Language Arts by student subgroup. So then you can take a look on the grid. Where did the different subgroups fall on language arts, on chronic absenteeism? And so anybody in the public, right, is able to go through and see where are those different subgroups falling on that grid. And this grid is about status and change, right? So the top row, or the left row, is what status are you in? And then the question is, and did that decline or increase from the previous year? And we'll look at the specific numbers in a future slide around chronic or around suspension in particular to see what those numbers look like. So then as you scroll down the California dashboard page, then you can kind of see some of the meat of each of the indicators. So here, the first ones we come to are the academic performance indicators, English Language Arts CASP, mathematics on the spring CASP assessment. In this case, they look at the scores a little bit differently than we look at them when I present to you in the fall. They're saying, what's the average scale score, and where is the district compared to the average score of a level 3 of a MET standard? And so actually the data comes out a little bit differently when I present it. So for example, if you look at English Language Arts, you see we maintained in English Language Arts. But if you remember in my fall presentation, we actually dropped in our CASP percent of students meeting or exceeding standard, right? So the percent of students meeting or exceeding standard dropped, but we probably had some gains of scale score growth below standard, so it's kind of evened out on the average scale score. It's another way to look at it. It's the way the state's using for this particular comparison. And in math here, we had a slight decline, a couple of scale score points. 4.7 point decline? But actually in mathematics, we increased half a percentage point, a little bit less than half a percentage point in mathematics of the percent of students who met or exceeded standards. So two different ways to look at the data. In either case, there was not growth and kept us in the orange bar for this year then. Here you can see for English learner progress, that's the LPAC last year. I did a presentation on that a month or so ago. And so you can see the percentage of students in each of the areas, but no color coding yet until they have a couple of years of data to show status and change. College career, here actually this percentage, 46.2% prepared, almost equivalent if the percentage that was in the mid-year review PowerPoint. We went from a percent A through G ready, right, from 39 to 47. We saw a big gain here, a 7% gain, also because one of the key things they look at is A through G readiness. And since our graduating class last year was the first class requiring A through G readiness, we saw a nice big uptick in percent college prepared. They can be prepared in other ways just by having 3s on both of the CASP tests, on having a 3 on one test, a 2 on the other test, along with the A through G, or along with the CTE pathway. It's a series of breakdown, but we can see that A through G readiness is one of the major ways that students can qualify as graduating seniors to be college and career ready. But they're working on having CTE, right, be a major part of that as well, the CTE pathways. Coming down through, then in chronic absenteeism, there was an increase there, but it does look like right now at this point in the year on the mid-year review slide that we are below this rate, but we're also coming into a end of the year, right? Both for suspensions, absenteeism, we have to wait to see how it plays out over the course of the spring. And as on graduation rate, we're in the green. So, it's really nice to see, some of the indicators, graduation rate above 90% in the green. Back on the previous one, college career indicator with that increase in the green in those two indicators. Now, college career, Ms. Padilla talked about, wanting to continue to move forward on that. It's going to be tough to continue to make those kind of jumps, right? Now the next years of graduating seniors, right, as we continue to push forward on those who are A through G ready in particular and don't get any Ds in any class. That's a tough one in many cases, especially if we aren't able to offer perhaps the amount of summer school. Our summer school program never has been able to really offer too many students the chance to make up a D, right? We've been really focused in helping students pass classes they haven't passed. So that's always a tough one to make a big inroads on. And then I mentioned before about suspension rate, the increase this year, but over a 5-year trend, we are still below where we were 4 or 5 years ago. So just looking at suspension rate and looking at this whole idea of status and change, what would it take, right? So if we say 5.5%, that was an increase of 1.5% from the previous year. So if we look at this, here's a typical chart that they have for each of these areas. Each of the indicators has this status and change chart. Am I going to get I can't show it up there. Okay. If we look on the left-hand side, we're in that 5.5, so we're down in the high, what's considered a high suspension rate for unified school districts. What does it take us to get to the medium? Well, we would just need to drop down to a 4.5% suspension rate. So, back down to where we were the last couple of years. So assuming this last year was an anomaly, we'll see how this plays out. It looks like our suspensions are at a lower rate so far this year. But if we would just drop 1 percentage point, that would put us in the medium. And so we say, okay, next year, 4.5 percentage rate, we're in the medium, and we decline. Then we look at the top, how much change would we have made? We would have made a 1% decline. Dropping down to 4.5 would put us in the green next year, right? So a very quick movement from an orange to a green, right, in 1 year. And so on the one hand, it's like, it's nice to know we could easily be in the green next year. On the other hand, we could easily be in the orange the following year, right? When you're just looking at any 1 year of change, you're going to have an uptick and downtick in things from year to year. So we have to say, yes, we have a few areas of orange that we need to be paying attention to, we need to be concerned about, but perhaps not saying, we're doing so bad in so many areas, but to say that was 1 year, let's look at our multi-year, let's look at the trends, and let's keep an eye on this over the next years. However, in some areas, we don't have that luxury because one of the parts of accountability is saying, the state is saying, do you have any areas where you have some significant issues with particular subgroups? And what they define as significant issues is, do you have any subgroups that have read in both language arts and mathematics and one other subject area? So in this case this year, we do have two subgroups. We have students with disabilities who had read in language arts and mathematics, and then they had a high growth in suspension rate last year, putting them in the red. And then for our homeless population, there was also in the, red in mathematics and language arts, and then in chronic absenteeism. So that puts us in the red. So what that triggers is county support. So we are now set to receive what's called targeted assistance. So targeted assistance is what the county then provides, and basically they will be involved with us this spring in a series of meetings to look at our LCAP and to help us make sure that our LCAP plan for next year addresses and looks at ways to tackle a couple of these issues. Now, these are some big issues, right? Homeless students and absenteeism is a big issue. Students with disabilities and academic success are big issues, right? So a slight tweak to our LCAP plan, right? It's going to be ongoing work that we're going to have to do, right? But it'll be looking at what are those steps we can take. If you look here, for chronic absenteeism, because it's such a small group, 68 students fell in this group last year for homeless. That's a pretty small group of students that any few students can really sway, and you can see it was a 13.7% increase in chronic absenteeism. We could easily sway the other direction this year, right, by a number of students. So on the one hand, I don't want to say it's not an issue, but I want to have us keep in mind the volatility of subgroups of this size and say, yes, it's an issue. Yes, we have people dedicated to this, but we need to look at it, and we can certainly look at ways that we can improve and focus our funds and our LCAP to continue to address some of these groups. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board? Ms. Munshi?
Thank you. That was very good. I had a question about LPAC. How is this new system being used to reclassify students, given the old system? So students who were measured on that, how does that move?
So here's looking at these results, right? So it's a 4 scale. It's a 4-point scale rather than the 5-point scale that the CELT had, right? So this first year, the state said, do whatever you want. Okay. So we said, all right. So we said, well, 4s, we would look at 4s, and we did is at Gilroy Unified this year, we said we're going to take the upper half of level 3s and consider them as well. So we looked at the upper half level 3s on overall and on the oral and written, and then all students who scored 4s and looked at those, and then meeting the other criteria, right? So we still have star reading, map reading, grades, right, teacher recommendation criteria on that. However, in the meantime, right when we were going through the process, the state just released their guidance for next year, and their guidance for next year is that students would have to score a 4 on LPAC. So that is the guidance moving forward for next year's reclassification. I don't feel like our numbers were a little low this year, so I don't feel like we over-reclassified, certainly. But, we'll then adhere to that and see what that leads us with next year with the level 4 overall.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Is Pisano.
Could you help me to understand the bottom of those dashboards, the equity report?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't mention that. Thanks. So at the bottom of each of the little baseball cards, I think they're calling them, you can then click on the little view more details down there. I can't hear, but if you're on the web page, you can click. And so those are the subgroups such as students with disabilities, homeless, foster, Hispanic, white. So it's the race, ethnicity, and then homeless, foster, English learners, students with disability, and socioeconomic disadvantage. So those subgroups and where did they fall? So then you click on that, and then it'll show you which are the subgroups that are in there. So it basically corresponds to this chart here then, right? So then you'll see this chart here to say, okay, in each of those areas, who were the 2 in the red, the 3 in the yellow, the one in the blue or whatever.
Mr. Diaz.
And why did some of them have less? Like some of them had up to 12 subgroups, and some of them only had like 6. And I could see how that could sway it in any direction.
Correct. So you had to have a certain minimum number of students in the subgroup, and some of these indicators were only seniors. So then there weren't enough homeless students to create a subgroup within the senior population. There weren't enough foster students.
Okay.
And whereas chronic absenteeism is K-12, so that's the entire school district, so it would be every subgroup represented unless some ethnicity was, very small representation.
And so that would also explain like slide 8, where like foster youth had none under graduation rate.
Right, because they would have had it would have to have at least 15.
Okay.
For foster youth and homeless, have to have at least 15 students, and so we wouldn't have had 15 seniors who were foster youth. Exactly.
It is super strange that you can be statistically significant in one category, but not another one. The number of students didn't change, right? That is
in which
like American Indian or Alaska Native. Apparently, there are enough students for chronic absenteeism, but not enough for English.
So chronic absenteeism is K-12, but English was only the CASP grade, so it's only 3 through 8 and 11. So it probably just went under with having just that would have been 60% of our 70% of our population.
Yeah.
And one more comment, and I found myself a couple times, I think overthinking it, like especially in the chronic, like for math, I can see we want it to be green, and graduation rate we want it to be green.
Right.
But when it came in suspension rate and chronic absenteeism, I was like, well, do we want it to be green in the sense that we're good at not having chronic absenteeism?
Right. I mean, you want to lower the rate to get a higher score, right? And the others you want to raise your rate. So those are reversed, right? And then
I almost feel like it's missing a reduced chronic absenteeism or reduced suspension rate.
Oh, that's true.
But green and blue are always good. That's the upshot, right?
However we got there.
Yeah. Anyone else on the board?
But thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right.
I have to say, it's very frustrating that there's no memory in this thing. So it's just going to jump around every year because there's no momentum.
Right. And so it's a 1-year snapshot, right? And it's important to remember.
Asks me, you look at your dashboard. I can't. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, they on graduation rate, they had started out saying the graduation was going to be the current rate compared to a 3-year average. I thought, hey, I really like that. And then they thought that was too complicated, so they moved away from it. I was kind of wishing they would have gone that rate on all of them. Say current versus a 3-year previous average. Say, okay, now we're getting to say let's keep some trend data in mind there. But then that would be more difficult to understand. And so
it wouldn't. I could explain that. This is. Yeah, well, it's the gauge is moving, and whatever.
Yeah. So there's usefulness, but to an extent that we have to remember. Yeah.
Thank you for the report.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next. Item F: approval of Gilroy Unified School District Plan for Low Performing Students Block Grant. Staff.
Good evening.
Ms. Bierman.
So I'm here to present the low-performing student block grant. This is good news in a way, and bad news in others. And good news is that we are receiving and have already received our first allocation of funds. We will be receiving as a district $630,352. However, piggybacking on what Mr. Schrock said, this is solely based, however, on CASP scores. And it's for students who are in the red in ELA and or mathematics. So the state in December basically notified school districts about this new funding source and sent out a list to all the districts and said, here is your number, and your number involves these students who are not otherwise eligible under LCFF. So when you think about that, you think about the targeted groups that are in our LCAP, you have to extract those students. So this does not include English learners. It does not include low income. It does not include our foster youth. It does not include our nor our special education students. And so what is left are students who are low performing solely, again, on the CASP. So as you can imagine, these are primarily secondary students because, again, it's only those CASP results, so fourth grade and up, right? And they gave us our number, 319 students, and then we in our database are able to identify those students by level and by school. And we are asked to develop a plan for the expenditure of the funds, and the plan has to be brought before the board, approved, a tentative plan, and by March 1st, we basically submit our first report. And our first report is the plan. And then subsequently, we will have to report on the expenditures. We have these funds through the 2021 school year. So we are allowed to spend those monies on that. And they're pretty broad in terms of how we can spend the monies. So you can see what we did is we basically first we reviewed our data. We said, who are these students? And we shared that data with all of our school sites so they could see who the students were. And we're starting to do some analysis of those student groups. You know, what kind of services they're getting, who are the students, is this a fluke thing that they just didn't score well on their CASP this time? We have students who are actually on grade level are getting fairly good grades but did poorly on CASP. We have others who have had a history of scoring poorly. So we kind of have a range of students. But from that, after discussing with our leaders about the groups of students and what could we do to put together a plan for the expenditures, we convened a smaller committee, and the committee looked at, what is it that these students need? We kind of looked at several areas. Well, clearly they need intervention and support. We know that they need academic support. That's not always easy to give to students, because particularly students who may not be receptive to that, they may not want to avail themselves of the additional services, any number of things. Just like sometimes when we provide summer school, some of our targeted students don't choose to come. Likewise for our interventions. But we also discovered in the conversation that there's a lot of other areas beyond the academics that are maybe preventing them or standing in the way of them achieving. Maybe they're disengaged from the school environment for whatever reason, right? For issues, emotional issues, social issues, or just there is something that's not preventing them from participating. So we really, that was a common theme among everyone as we discussed this, is that those support services are equally important to the academic services. And so in our plan, as you can see, it is a broad plan at this point because really we want to try to kind of hone in and begin to figure out how we're going to support these students. Now, we are allowed and we must align it with the LCAP. So clearly what we're providing as services, this is going to be embedded in the LCAP as well. So we can add to some of the services. Some of these children or our students are already getting services, but we're going to add additional ones. And other students may participate as well. But we're going to do everything that we can to invite and include these students in the plan. So those three main areas, as I mentioned, kind of increased support. We've identified middle school. You heard Deb talk earlier about our kind of new model of the intervention and enrichment period, and we really like to capitalize on that and try to do better with that and see how we can support the students at the middle school level, again, preventing them from maybe continuous failure. And so we want to enhance that support, that intervention, make it much more targeted and strategic and say what is going to happen in those classroom times, because those are times when we have the students, right? We can actually intervene. It's not before or after school. But we do have additional services. I know some of our middle schools, they offer Saturday academies. We thought about the idea of making those more engaging, including some activities that will engage students as well as the academic. So it's not purely, remedial in nature. So the big areas around the direct student support, but also coordination of our intervention services so that there is more consistency, some training for staff so that they know how to do that. Again, at middle school, it's a little more complex. And then materials and supplies, we're allowed to spend monies on that. And the second component, as I mentioned, was sort of the non-academic areas, counseling, but other kinds of things to engage students. What could that look like? Mentoring. What does it look like where there's some kind of, again, adult in the student's life or something that we can provide for the students? Credit recovery, we will use some of the funds to continue to provide credit recovery for our high school students because we definitely want to kind of get at it from all angles. And even looking at maybe for some of those students that are leaving middle school, going into high school, what can we do to kind of get them ready or engage them in that process? So those are the big ideas. And then the data process, the data monitoring. We really need to we need to monitor these students as we go along. What you should know is that list included seniors. So, seniors in their second semester, it's really going to be hard for us to intervene for any, of great significance. So, but we know that there will be others perhaps to take their place next year that will be in the same category. At this point, these are the only students that have been identified, and we have this 3-year period. We want to come to the end of the 3-year period and we say, we have fewer students now who meet this criteria. That's our goal. So that's our plan. And again, we can actually begin now to expend the funds all the way through 2021 school year.
Thank you very much. Ms. Paceno?
So when I first saw this, I got really excited. Wow, $630,000. And then being the numbers nerd that I am, so divided by 319 kids, divided by 3 is $658 a year per kid.
Yeah.
Which it isn't much, especially for this population, because you're talking low-functioning kids that don't fall into the normal categories where we would automatically assume that and have services for them. So it is going to be a tough population. My question is, that 319, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, is not a static number.
Right.
Next year we'll have...
Right.
Every year
we're not sure if they're going to give us a whole new database, next year, or just say, monitor any student. So we're going to do 2 prongs. We're going to monitor these kids, obviously
right.
Not the ones that are graduating, but we're going to monitor these kids and look for growth. But also, as next year, we'll do our own identification
right.
of the students that fall in that category. Right now, if you add up your numbers, we only have 300 because. I think I sent you at the levels that how many. So 19 kids are since they identified this from last spring's CASP scores. 19 students aren't in our district, right? But I'm sure they've been replaced with maybe some other students.
Exactly.
So that will continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right.
One question.
Oh, please.
Is that what the assessment was made, was off of the CASP results?
Solely on the CASP. So it's not, as opposed to the dashboard that has all these different factors, this is solely on the CASP.
Okay. All right. I will entertain a motion to approve this request for grant? No, this grant. This plan for the grant. There we go.
So move.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item G, monthly district cash flow update. Ms. Smith.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Flores, Board President Pace, and board members. I'm going to bring you up to current status on our general fund monthly cash flow. And this slide right here is based on the actuals from the beginning of the school year, July through January. And we did have a TRAN this year, which is a temporary revenue anticipation note that we received in the beginning of July, a little over almost $5 million there at the beginning. And then in January, we did pay back 50%, which was a little over 2.4. So if you look at the January column, our beginning cash balance is a little over 22.3 million. And the money that we brought in that month is a little over 14.4. And the expenditures or the cash outflow for that month is a little over 10.8 million. And the decrease or the increase of between what was total brought in and what was spent is a little over 3.5. And then we have down there with the ending cash balance with the TRAN would be a little over 24.1 million. Without a TRAN, it would have been around 21.7. Of the cash outflow, the 10.857 up there, the payroll is a little over 8.6 million, which is around 80% of our total general fund expenditures for that month. And the next slide is just another way of looking at the cash flow in and out for that month and from July through all the way through January. And the rest of the months are projections, still based on first interim. We're working on second interim right now, so the next cash flow will be based on those numbers. Any questions?
Questions?
Oh, what happened to my little picture?
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the report. It's good to.
You're welcome.
Having a monthly
it's not
update.
that exciting, but we have money, so that's a good thing.
You don't want excitement in a fiscal report. All right. Next up, item H, Energy Conservation Design Build Services Request for Qualifications. Ms. Galloway.
Thank you. This is going to be very exciting. Today,
You can be exciting.
Today what I want to share with you is a request for qualifications for energy conservation design build services. For those of you who don't know, we've had an energy program, conservation program in the district since 2010. So we're going into our 9th year, believe it or not. And during that time, we've done a lot with behavior modification on running things only when students are actually in the classroom, not having things going on late in the evening or on weekends or over breaks. We've also done a lot of upgrades. Just this last summer, we spent $2.5 million out of Prop 39. We waited a long time for, but we finally got the funding. And we put in new HVAC equipment, we put in a lot of LED lights, and we put in some controls to be able to make sure that things aren't running over the breaks and in the evenings. So we've done a lot of different things. But now what's happening is a lot of companies that we've worked with and a lot of companies that deal with energy efficiency products, they've come up with this plan where they do a design build of what should be your next steps as far as energy conservation. And so what we would do with this RFQ is, if with your approval, I'll put it out tomorrow morning, and then these companies will look at it and they'll decide if they want to come in and basically do a really deep dive on where we are with our energy efficiency. What everybody should be aware of is the general fund, which Alvaro's been talking a lot to you about. The general fund, the majority of it is salaries, but all of our utilities also come out of the general fund. So anything we can save in our utilities or not spend towards utilities, we can have for staff, and that's fewer cuts that everybody has to make. So that's why this stuff is so important. But with this deep dive, what they'll do is they'll go through, they'll look at everything that we have done, they'll look at what new products are out there, they'll look at things that we might want to do in the future, and then they will actually design an energy conservation plan for us moving forward. What I really like about this is if you look at our requirements, one of them is that the performance contract pays the entire design project with zero out-of-pocket costs. We are not doing this so that somebody can come to us and say, all we need is $30 million in bond funds and we can change your whole district. We're not putting any money out for this. So not only do they design what we could do, but then they introduce us to, there are these energy credits coming from the state, or maybe there's more Prop 39 money coming down the pike. Maybe PG&E is going to do some on-bill financing. So they're not only going to come up with solutions, but they're going to come up with ways that we can pay for them that doesn't affect our general fund and doesn't come out of pocket. So it's going to give us a nice overview of what we've done in the last 9 years and then where we want to go in the next 9 years. So I'm very excited about it. I hope you all say yes to it. And I do have one thing that I want to change, though. Sorry. So if you look at page 3, under minimum requirements for submittal, so what happens with an RFQ is if you approve this tonight, then tomorrow morning in facilities we have a pre-qualification list. And on that list are all the vendors that we've used over time. We have a good relationship who are qualified. And what we do is we email them the RFQ so they can decide if they want to be on it. So if you look at page 3 of the RFQ, one of my minimum requirements was that they be accredited by the National Association of Energy Services Companies. When I looked at our pre-qual list, most of our vendors are not a member of this. This is a great organization, but I started asking, well, why aren't they members of this? And there's a large fee associated. This is a paid membership. So based on that, I would like to add the word optional at the end of that requirement. If somebody is, or if a company is a member, I'd still like to know it because they do a lot of research. So, you know, it's a gold star if you are a member of this. But at the same time, I don't want to eliminate our local vendors or the vendors we've used on our pre-qualification list just because they didn't pay the fee to be a member of this group. So I am recommending that we move forward with the RFQ tomorrow morning with the one change of putting the word optional after the accredited by section on page 3 of minimum requirements. See? Fun.
Board, what is any discussion? If not, with the amendment as presented, I will entertain a motion.
So move with the amendment as presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Go get some free
Great.
money.
Thank you. I'll be back in about 2 months. Let you know what we found out. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Item I, second reading of updates to board policies. Did everyone memorize their parts?
So we presented these to you at the last board meeting, and I asked that if you had any questions, concerns, comments, to send them in. We received none, so I'm recommending that the board approve these updates.
Any discussion?
The only discussion I have, no changes to any of the board policies, but I have some questions, some exciting things in there that I'll forward, and maybe we can get some information in a Sunday reporter.
Sure.
Stuff like that. But no changes to the wording of any of these.
All right, I will entertain a motion.
So move.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And now we are on item J, ratification of contract between Gilroy Unified and Decision Insight for boundary and enrollment services. Mr. Mesa.
Good evening, Board. Good evening, Superintendent. Once again, this is a ratification of contract with Decision Insight in the district to conduct boundary services and enrollment services. The school closure committee, the superintendent's school closure committee has convened and has one meeting and an upcoming meeting in March. And Kermit and Marvell, our Director of Technology, have both been instrumental in already working with them so that we can see our student data essentially plotted over a Google map overlay, and then they'll overlay the boundaries, and then you could literally, out of a click of a button, pick and choose which schools to overlap, drag boundaries, create your own. And the efficiency of this is because it tabulates the number of students. It'll know our capacity because we provided them all that data. And you can see during the exercise of what we have to entertain for the 2021 year, if a school will be over capacity, under capacity. And then once they've essentially drawn up a boundary that we're entertaining as a scenario, they can then forecast 5 years, 10 years based on that new boundary, because also input census from the data from the census on birth rates, and they can extrapolate similar to what our current demographer does, but in a hard copy. They can do that in a model that's very effective for us to use. This is a 5-year agreement. This allows, I wouldn't be recommending this if it didn't save money. We would be reducing 2 consultants and consolidating with 1. For year 1, the total cost shall not exceed $16,536.50. And then by year 2, so even at this point, we're saving a couple of $2,000. Year 2 through 5, the total would be $15,882. Well, currently we're spending in excess of $18,000 between the 2 consultants. And the level of, if I can speak, I did reference check because I try to do a lot of work when I bring a ratification to contract for the board. I did check the references. Twin Rivers, Bill McGuire is a CBO, has been a long-standing CBO, renowned throughout the state. He was in Fresno, a large district there. I was really happy with him. Now he's in Twin Rivers. Bill has been a superintendent. CBO is a rare talent. And just really rave about these guys. Santa Cruz City Schools, where I was, we used Decision Insight. I didn't overlap with them too much, but they've been happy with them for the last 5 years there. And their enrollment projections have been well within 1%, which is better than our last couple of years for us. And they've been fairly accurate. And they also had a hard call there about a school closure 3 or 4 years ago. And Decision Insight helped them really tremendously with that process. And they work with 100 districts in the state of California. I did look at another one, a vendor that worked primarily with municipalities, but they had a similar platform, very effective platform that allowed the end user to drag and drop, if you will. But they only work with one real school district, and their lead time in terms of getting the data was going to be 4 to 6 weeks. And thanks again to Kermit and Maribel, they're already starting to accept the data. There's a lot of work that these two have to do to make this work, but we really needed to get a jump in so that by the school closure committee on March 1st, we would have something to look at by then.
Thank you. It's super important we have good data as we move into this next phase of this process. Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Good.
I think it would be, if the school closure committee comes to consensus that a school needs to be closed, I think having the software is critical, because if we close the school, all the boundaries are going to have to be readjusted. Yes. And that would be an extremely cumbersome and labor-intensive process without software like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, not on the two consultants that we have, but we need a powerful consolidated tool that in real time you can see changes, as Trustee Good has suggested, and more so forecast in real time what that's going to look like, so that we can drop a scenario almost immediately as soon as we realize it's going down the wrong path. And my apologies for making some errors on the contract. We were really pushing this to get it on the agenda. So there were some technical issues that Trustee Good has looked at, and we've corrected those, and they're included in your packet.
You've gotten your errors for the year completed.
My hand has been slapped. Thank you.
I will entertain a motion to approve this ratification.
Move approval.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Item K, service agreement with MacArthur and Levin LLP for the 2018-19 school year.
I'm going to do this
Your
item.
staff now.
Ms. Polito couldn't be here this evening, so I'll just, the board's aware that we conducted, we basically sought proposals from legal firms to provide special education services. We narrowed that down to 3 firms. We interviewed those firms. We had board members on the interview. And out of that, we're recommending that we enter into an agreement with MacArthur and Levin. They currently serve about half the school districts in the county, and they work for the county office. They've been doing this for 25 years. We have excellent references. Anna's talked to many people that use MacArthur Levin. And this is all they do, special ed. They are special ed attorneys. They know it inside and out. They've handled numerous due process hearings and litigation. And we're just really excited to have such a strong firm represent our district in special ed matters. So Anna and I both recommending that you approve this contract. The not to exceed $100,000, that's not in addition. We've been paying another firm to provide special ed legal services. This would be in lieu of that. So we just wrote it for the rest of the year up to $100,000 based on what we've been spending to date with the other firm.
Comments or questions? I will entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Yeah, figure that one out.
Good luck, Leslie.
I'm glad you got that.
Take your pick.
Yes. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Next, item 7, board members' reports. Going once, going twice. Thank you. Next, item 8, upcoming and new referral agenda items.
The only thing I would mention is that we don't have the joint city council board meeting on here, but based on a discussion earlier, the city council has proposed that it be held on March 25th. We had originally had it on here for February 26th, so just to let you know, we'll add that to our next board calendar, and hopefully, I believe 6 or 7 said you could come, right? On that night, 6 o'clock here.
Here.
Yes.
Okay. Item 9, announcements. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education will be March 7th, right here. Closed session at 5:30, regular meeting at 7. Agenda published on the Friday before that. And we are adjourned.